Have you ever looked up at an airplane soaring through the sky and wondered how humanity figured out how to fly? For thousands of years, people watched birds glide effortlessly through the air and dreamed of joining them. Today, we take flight for granted. We hop on planes to visit family, go on vacation, or conduct business across the globe. But the story of how we conquered the skies is one of the most remarkable adventures in human history. Let me take you on a journey through time, from ancient dreams of flight to the incredible flying machines that connect our modern world. The dream of flight is as old as civilization itself. Ancient myths are filled with stories of humans taking to the air. The Greeks told the tale of Daedalus and Icarus, who fashioned wings from feathers and wax to escape imprisonment. Icarus flew too close to the sun, his wax wings melted, and he plunged into the sea. It was a warning about hubris, but also a testament to humanity's deep longing to soar. In China, around 400 BCE, people were already experimenting with kites. These were not just toys, they were serious investigations into how objects could stay aloft in the wind. Some historical accounts suggest that kites large enough to carry humans were built and tested, though the results were mixed at best. Leonardo da Vinci, the great Renaissance genius, filled notebooks with sketches of flying machines in the late 1400 and early 1500 period. He designed ornithopters, machines that would fly by flapping wings like a bird. He sketched what we might recognize today as a helicopter and even drew concepts for a parachute. Leonardo understood that air had substance and that wings could push against it. But the materials and power sources of his time were nowhere near sufficient to make his dreams reality. For centuries, brave and often foolish inventors strapped wings to their arms and leaped from towers, cliffs, and buildings. They were called tower jumpers. Most of these attempts ended in injury or death. What these early pioneers lacked was a scientific understanding of how flight actually works. The breakthrough came not from flapping wings, but from hot air. In 1783, two French brothers named Joseph and Jacques Montgolfier made a stunning discovery. They noticed that smoke and hot air rose upward. What if they could capture enough hot air to lift something into the sky? On September 19, 1783, the Montgolfier brothers demonstrated their invention before King Louis XVI at Versailles. A sheep, a duck, and a rooster became the first air travelers, lifted skyward in a beautifully decorated balloon. The flight lasted about 8 minutes and traveled roughly 2 miles. The animals landed safely, proving that creatures could survive at altitude. Just 2 months later, on November 21, 1783, 2 humans made history. Jean-François Pilatre de Rosier and François Laurent Darlande floated over Paris in a Montgolfier balloon, staying aloft for about 25 minutes and covering 5 miles. Humanity had finally left the ground. Ballooning spread rapidly across Europe. People were amazed by this new technology, but balloons had a fundamental limitation. You could go up and down, you could drift with the wind, but you could not truly control where you went. True powered flight remained elusive. Throughout the 1800s, inventors turned their attention to heavier-than-air machines. George Cayley, an English engineer, is often called the father of aviation. Working in the early 1800s, Cayley identified the 4 forces that govern flight, lift, weight, thrust, and drag. He built small gliders and tested them systematically. In 1853, when Cayley was 79 years old, he built a glider large enough to carry a human. His coachman became the first adult to fly in a heavier-than-air craft, gliding across a small valley on Cayley's estate. The coachman reportedly quit his job afterward, saying he was hired to drive, not to fly. Cayley's work inspired others. Otto Lilienthal, a German engineer, became obsessed with understanding how birds flew. He built and tested over 18 different glider designs between 1891 and 1896. Lilienthal made more than 2,000 flights, carefully documenting what worked and what did not. He photographed his flights, and these images spread around the world, inspiring a new generation of aviation enthusiasts. Tragically, Lilienthal died in 1896 when a gust of wind caused his glider to stall. His last words reportedly were "small sacrifices must be made." His death shocked the world, but his research lived on. Two bicycle mechanics in Dayton, Ohio studied his work intensely. Their names were Wilbur and Orville Wright. The Wright brothers approached flight differently than their predecessors. They were not wealthy. They did not have university educations or government funding. What they had was methodical intelligence, mechanical skill, and relentless determination. The Wrights realized that three problems needed to be solved. First, wings that could generate enough lift. Second, an engine that was powerful yet light enough. Third, and most importantly, a way to control the aircraft once it was in the air. Other inventors focused on building more powerful engines or larger wings. The Wrights focused on control. They studied how birds twisted their wingtips to turn and maintain balance. They invented a system called wing warping that allowed a pilot to roll the aircraft by twisting the wings. This was revolutionary. They built a wind tunnel in their bicycle shop and tested over 200 different wing shapes. They discovered that much of the published data on aerodynamics was wrong. They had to figure everything out themselves. In 1903, after years of glider experiments at Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, the Wrights were ready to attempt powered flight. Their aircraft, the Wright Flyer, had a wingspan of about 40 feet and was powered by a 12-horsepower engine they had designed and built themselves. On December 17, 1903, a cold and windy day, Orville Wright climbed onto the lower wing of the Flyer. The engine sputtered to life. The aircraft moved down its wooden launching rail and lifted into the air. That first flight lasted just 1-2 seconds and covered 120 feet, shorter than the wingspan of a modern Boeing 747, but it was enough. Powered, controlled, heavier than air flight was finally achieved. They made 4 flights that day. The longest, piloted by Wilbur, lasted 59 seconds and covered 852 feet. Then a gust of wind flipped the Flyer and damaged it beyond repair, but it did not matter. The age of aviation had begun. At first, the world did not pay much attention. Many people simply did not believe the reports, but the Wrights kept improving their designs. By 1905, they had an aircraft that could fly for over half an hour and make turns and figure eights. Eventually, the world took notice. Aviation advanced rapidly in the years that followed. Within a decade of the first flight, pilots were performing aerobatic maneuvers and setting distance records. Then World War I broke out in 1914, and everything changed. Governments suddenly saw the military potential of aircraft. Planes were used for reconnaissance, spotting enemy positions from above. Then pilots started carrying pistols and shooting at each other. Then machine guns were mounted on the aircraft themselves. Fighter planes and bombers emerged. By the end of the war in 1918, aircraft had evolved from fragile wooden contraptions into serious weapons of war. The war accelerated aviation technology by years, perhaps decades. Engines became more powerful, aircraft became more reliable, and crucially, many young men learned to fly. After the war, these pilots looked for ways to keep flying. Barnstormers traveled from town to town, performing aerial stunts and offering rides to anyone brave enough to climb aboard. Aviation entered the public imagination in a new way. Flying was dangerous, exciting, romantic. In 1919, pilots began attempting to cross the Atlantic Ocean by air. A prize of $25,000 had been offered for the first non-stop flight between New York and Paris. Several attempts ended in failure or tragedy. Then, on May 20 and 21, 1927, a 25-year-old airmail pilot named Charles Lindbergh did what many thought impossible. Flying alone in a single-engine monoplane called the Spirit of St. Louis, Lindbergh took off from New York and flew for 33 hours and 30 minutes across the Atlantic. He landed in Paris to a crowd of 150,000 people who had come to witness history. Lindbergh became the most famous person on Earth overnight. His flight proved that aviation could connect continents. The 1930s saw the rise of commercial aviation. Airlines began carrying passengers on regular routes. Aircraft like the Douglas DC-3, introduced in 1936, made air travel comfortable and economically viable. The DC-3 could carry 21 passengers and had a range of about 1,500 miles. It was reliable, relatively quiet, and profitable to operate. Many aviation historians consider it the most important aircraft ever built. Then came World War II, and aviation transformed once again. Bombers grew enormous. Fighters became faster and more deadly. Radar changed how wars were fought. And in the final days of the war, two new technologies emerged that would reshape aviation forever. The first was the jet engine. German engineers had developed operational jet fighters by 1944. Jets were faster than propeller aircraft and pointed toward the future of aviation. After the war, jet technology spread rapidly. The second was the atomic bomb. Dropped from aircraft, these weapons demonstrated the terrifying power that could be delivered from the sky. Aviation was no longer just about transportation. It was about the fate of nations. The post-war years brought the jet age to commercial aviation. The de Havilland Comet, the world's first commercial jetliner, entered service in 1952. It was sleek and fast, but tragic structural failures grounded the fleet. Engineers learned hard lessons about metal fatigue and pressurization cycles. Boeing took those lessons and built the 707, which entered service in 1958. The 707 was reliable, economical, and could cross the Atlantic in about 7 hours. It revolutionized international travel. Flying went from a luxury for the wealthy to something the middle class could afford. The 1960s brought supersonic flight. Military jets had broken the sound barrier years earlier, but now commercial supersonic travel seemed within reach. The British and French collaborated on the Concorde, while the Soviets built the Tupolev 144. The Concorde entered service in 1976 and could fly from New York to London in about 3 hours. But supersonic travel never became mainstream. The Concorde was expensive to operate, extremely loud, and banned from flying supersonic over land due to sonic booms. It remained a luxury for the few until its retirement in 2003. Meanwhile, a different revolution was taking place. In 1970, Boeing introduced the 747, the first wide-body jet. This enormous aircraft could carry nearly 400 passengers. It made long-distance travel affordable for millions of people. The jumbo jet age had arrived. Aircraft continued to improve. Composite materials made them lighter. Computer systems made them safer and more efficient. Navigation went from paper maps and ground-based radio beacons to satellite-based GPS. Autopilot systems became so sophisticated that aircraft could take off, cruise, and land with minimal human input. By the 1990s, air travel had become almost routine. Billions of passengers flew every year. Aircraft accidents became rare events that made international news precisely because they were so unusual. Aviation had become one of the safest forms of transportation ever created. Today, we stand at another turning point. Electric and hybrid aircraft are being tested. Drones are delivering packages and may soon carry passengers. Companies are working on aircraft that can take off and land vertically, potentially transforming urban transportation. Some engineers are even revisiting supersonic flight, trying to design aircraft that are quiet enough to fly over populated areas. When Orville Wright made that first 12-second flight, he could not have imagined modern airports, with hundreds of thousands of passengers passing through each day. He could not have imagined aircraft that fly themselves, or drones the size of hummingbirds, or spacecraft launched from high-altitude aircraft. The history of aviation is a story of dreamers who refused to accept that humans were bound to the earth. It is a story of engineers who solved problems others said were impossible. It is a story of pilots who risked everything to push the boundaries of what could be done. And perhaps most remarkably, it all happened in just over a century. Your great-grandparents might have been alive when the Wright brothers flew. Your grandchildren might vacation on the moon. The sky was never the limit. It was just the beginning.